Comparison price for Wednesday, April 30th, 2025. Coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the historic Wall Center. In this program, a presentation of Bet365. Matt Sakaris alongside Blake Price, four-time Juno Award winner Mike Rogerson, hitting switches, conducting things, and boy, do we have some show for you today.
Bit of news yesterday.
I was thinking about this yesterday. Actually, on my way to the Nat. I had a fun night there. I'm not sure I could remember what a regular offseason looks like anymore.
I had this thought too.
I'm not sure, Blake, that we could still do regular offseason shows. Like, if we get a regular offseason next like, we're in some trouble here.
Like the Calgary Flames missed the playoffs.
Totally normal offseason happening there.
They cleaned out their lockers. They said, we can't wait for next year. Hope we're better. Goodbye, everybody.
They have not made one iota of news since their locker cleanout. In fact, I'm not even sure they made news on locker cleanout day to begin with.
No. Ryan Huska's Hockey Canada.
Ryan Huska is secure as the head coach. They're looking to build on what was a season that I think exceeded expectations there. They will be looking to circle some young players into the lineup next season. And, they got a few free agents to deal with there, although really not huge. I mean,
no.
Morgan Frost, Coronado, Zari are RFAs, but RFAs, you usually keep them, right? Mantha's a UFA. No big whoop. Yeah.
That's what a normal offseason looks like.
Regular offseason?
Don't do that here.
No, we don't do that here. We don't do that here at all. And honestly, at the end of last season for the Vancouver Canucks, I thought the phenomenon of getting texts and DMs and calls from friends all around the league going, holy shit, look what you guys have. I thought that might subdue silly me.
Yeah.
So here we are. Yesterday, the news on Tocchet came down during the course of our show. We didn't have all the answers at the time. We have many more answers now. We will start with the Surrey Mitsubishi poll question. Do you blame Rick Tocchet for leaving the Canucks? You can vote yes, you can vote no. Do so at the Sakaris and Price X and YouTube channels. Blake Price.
The answer for me is no. There's still an element of surprise. Like a week and a half ago, I thought they're going to get Wielander signed. Don't worry. They're going to get Rick Tocchet signed. There might be a little bit of drama for him, but it's going to happen. So I'm surprised that he didn't get signed. But at the same time, do I blame him for walking away? Nope. For one or two big reasons. Elias Pettersson, there's history there, obviously. It's not working. And he's got skepticism about it. And again, we've said this countless times already. Only they know how serious the risk is of a Quinn Hughes departure. But I'm going to guess that Rick Tocchet looked at it and saw a significant enough risk that in 1 to 2 years' time, he will no longer be a Vancouver Canuck. And I say one, you'd be like, oh, he's got 2 years left, though, Blake. Well, yes, but if they don't see any positivity a year from now, he's not going to show up in training camp in the fall. Like, he'll show up, but the Canucks won't have him there. They'll want to move him. So if you're pretty sure as a signing head coach that you don't have Quinn Hughes in 1 to 2 years' time, yeah, that would be enough to probably scare me off.
It was a year from hell. I voted no as well. It was a year from hell. The uncertainty with the star players, as you've noted, and not just Quinn Hughes, but Elias Pettersson too, right? Like,
who knows what he is?
Is he going to be a star again? You have a high maintenance organization here. You particularly have a high maintenance ownership group. Like when the owner wants to live in your pockets and be your buddy in Yaletown and stuff, like when socializing with the owner is part of the job description.
Mm-hmm.
And there are opportunities elsewhere where the future appears brighter, or where at least, and we've been talking about this for a while, the runway and thus the money is probably greater. Philadelphia, they want to get back to being in the playoffs. But if they miss the playoffs next year with head coach Rick Tocchet, he's not getting canned. I mean, something would have to go horribly wrong, right? He's got a few years there.
Completely.
Yeah. Whereas if you get off to a bad start here next year, everything's about making the playoffs, right? For this ownership group, need that playoff revenue. So, who knows? The change could happen right there and then. So, no, I don't blame him. Now, if you want to say Rick Tocchet quit on the Vancouver Canucks, yeah, that's technically true. I think his side would argue he's out of contract and a free agent, which is also technically true.
But that's a formal reading of quit on the contract. He quit on the job, on the task of making the Vancouver Canucks a winner.
Very good. Very good. If you want to say Rick Tocchet, talked about embracing the hard and then didn't do so himself, also fair, although, that phrase, embrace the hard, it's a different context when you're all under contract in the same dressing room pursuing a common goal. It's a little different when you're out of contract and you have to think about your own future. And he's looking out for number one here, and I can't blame him.
Yeah.
Hard to ever blame someone for looking out for one's own best interests.
Life is short, too.
Yeah.
You don't waste years.
No, and I can understand how some Canucks fans are put off by this. He doesn't love us. He doesn't want us. He doesn't think we can win here. I completely understand all of that. And if that manifests in some anger, disappointment, criticism of Tocchet, calling him a hypocrite, a quitter, whatever the case may be, yeah, look, I understand. Fans, it's an emotional game.
Mm-hmm.
But no, I don't blame him at all. Having covered the Canucks for nearly 2 decades now, you are aware that this is a organization and an employer unlike most.
Yeah.
And is quite difficult to navigate over the long term. Our friends at Surrey Mitsubishi are giving you $500 off a new or pre-owned vehicle. All you have to do is visit the lot, mention Sekeresum price, and bring them any offer. If you got an offer out there, you can get a certain vehicle from a certain place at a certain price. Bring it to Surrey Mitsubishi. They will beat it. More value, more savings, score more, save more. Visit 13820 104th Avenue. Let's get to our top story. It's brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Foolish Winery. Had me a Yellow Dog last night at the Nat.
So did I.
Pouring there. See ya. Wouldn't want to be ya. Tocchet quits on Canucks, leaves the organization reeling and answering more tough questions with few good answers. The one thing that we had talked about in the build-up to Decision Day with Tocchet, and Blake, unlike you, I was becoming more and more convinced that Tocchet was going to move on. I mentioned on yesterday's program, I got a call out of the blue in December from someone who is very connected in NHL coaching circles, knows a lot of NHL coaches, who mentioned to me, Tocchet's let it be known to some friends here that he's done in Vancouver after this year. He doesn't want to go through this shit again. And this was in the immediate aftermath, of course, of the Miller-Pettersson feud rearing up. And that JT benching in November against Nashville.
Can you think of anything similar to this?
So I had that on, just, rattling around. Pebble in the vast open spaces up there all season. And then when he wasn't fussy to, immediately re-sign, when he talked about, single focus on the playoff chase, and then when the season ended and he couldn't definitively answer questions about wanting to be back, I think the writing was on the wall. So I wasn't altogether surprised to hear the news yesterday. I was a little bit surprised to hear and read all the reporting that the Canucks stepped up contract-wise, that money and term were not an issue, that Vancouver moved a fair ways from where they had ever been in terms of coaching.
Which is more of a condemnation of the situation, which tells
to
you
a degree
that
it
he
is.
looked
Yeah,
at
like,
he looked
when
at
you say it's not the money in turn. No, the contract itself would have been fine. Wow.
By all accounts, given his resume, which is not lengthy,
No,
or
he's been a second round once,
or great, really.
No.
He was probably going to be overpaid if he said yes to the Vancouver Canucks offer.
Yep.
And he still said no.
Yeah. Now, Rick cited family priorities in the release, and I thought it was a very classy statement from Tocchet. I think he touched them all. He covered all the bases there in terms of his thank yous and his well wishes on the way out the door. Not surprised, because Rick has handled himself with class and dignity, and it's an odd word for a guy with a mug like that who played the game like he did, but with grace. Going back to the old Seinfeld episode, very few have grace. Mm-hmm. But I think all those terms apply to Rick Tocchet.
Which
over
again,
his 2.5 years here in Vancouver.
Again, is such a condemnation of what must have gone down here, because he's a pretty well-respected guy who's very level-headed,
super respected.
Under pressure. Like, is there a guy that gets less flapped on the bench than Rick Tocchet? Not many.
Oh, we had talked about the composure.
Yeah.
For a guy who played the game with all that fire and emotion and brimstone, the composure on the bench, the composure in post-game media scrums where he gets the raw deal from the officials and the first words out of his mouth, almost routinely, he's a good official.
And he's a guy that speaks of loyalties too, right? And so, again, I ask you, can you think of any scenario in NHL history, and there probably is one, but it's certainly not ready at the beck and call here, where 2.5 years into a tenure, a coach just says, nah, I'm done. Larry Robinson? How long was that?
Yeah, Larry Robinson has always sort of had a bit of a tortured relationship with being a head coach. He's been successful at it, but he's preferred to be an assistant, preferred to be in the background,
like coaches walk away
working with players and actually being teachers as opposed to having to deal with everything a head coach has to do.
Coaches walk away after a fair amount of time. Mm-hmm. So he walked away, Robinson did, after 4 years as coach of the LA Kings. Mm-hmm. 4 years.
What was the Jersey? Jersey 2. Didn't he walk away from Jersey at one point as well?
But that was 3.5 years.
That was after winning a cup, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Now, Tocchet allowed that he wants to explore other opportunities, quote, in and around hockey. And Jim Rutherford said in his press conference yesterday that he wants to be back east. So is he burnt out after the year from hell? I think you completely understand that. And if in and around hockey means going back to broadcasting, that very much tracks. Does he want to coach the Philadelphia Flyers or a different organization? I can also completely understand that. And I know there are some Canucks fans for whom that will be quite harsh. They look at the Flyers, all the losing, all the rebuilding, don't necessarily see a team that is playoff worthy in the next year or two, whatever the case may be, and think to themselves, he rejected our team for that. Yeah, that would be a tough pill to swallow. There's, of course, also a lot of personal history there as well, including one of his good friends, Keith Jones, running the team. I suppose the same would hold true to a degree with the Rangers when you look at the age of that team and how much is their window open, if at all. But it's Manhattan, it's Broadway, it's a premier market.
Those are the top two. Well, I understand Boston. The Boston thing. I would guess he considers probably those three. Yeah.
I mean, we've kicked around the others, like the Seattles and the Anaheims. Yeah, of course, those would be tough pills. But we may not know all the reasons and all the things that are important to Rick Tocchet if he is, in fact, on a job hunt for a coaching position. Now, can he not work with Elias Pettersson anymore. And Frank Saravelli was on with our friends Huff and Bruff this morning saying Petey blew him off last summer. And Rutherford allowed that Tocchet was actually going to get on a plane and go to visit Elias in Sweden. I mean, that's a little bit of the mountain coming to Muhammad. But look, it was a tortured relationship between Pettersson and Tocchet as well. Elias is not easy. And I think Rick tried and tried and tried his best and still wasn't quite getting through to the young man. And there were some harsh words publicly. I think after most every other avenue was exhausted, it may well have been that relationship was beyond repair. It may well be from Elias's side of things. The trust had been broken, that he effectively diminished that knee injury, knee tendonitis, basically said he wasn't tough enough, and that there was no coming back from that, given how public it was and given how much Elias hates those sorts of internal matters being out there publicly. And it could very well also be, as Patrick Allvin allowed in his year-end presser, that all his options are being kept open. But, of course, the easiest, the cleanest, the preference would be for Elias to go out, have a terrific summer, build up some strength, build up some burst, come back and be the star player that he once was and that they hope him to be again, particularly at $11.6 million. And when this was presented to Rick Tocchet, he just didn't think it would be successful, and that helped in making the decision to leave.
Well, I think he could, too, make the calculus that, okay, even if we can get him back to a semblance of what he was, we've had to go through all of this, bend over backwards to make it happen for this guy. Is this a guy that's going to go to war with me in the playoffs where it gets a lot harder?
Right.
And
there may be some lingering resentment there that JT Miller, very much a Rick Tocchet type of player, had to depart to cater or to can't find the word I'm looking for, but to get the best out of Elias. We talked about it at the time of the trade, right? Okay, you're making this move, and you know you're taking nickels or dimes on the dollar, whatever your favorite analogy is there. But the hope is that you now have a supportive environment where Elias can thrive. And that remains a question. And that is something that Jim Rutherford was talking about yesterday when he talked about the new coach having to solve the enigma that is Elias Pettersson.
As for the major issue we had to deal with in the first half, it wore really hard on everybody. Players, coaches, managers. It was tough, okay? But we can't talk about that forever. It's behind us now. Whether we did the right thing or we didn't do the right thing, it's behind us. It was a decision that I don't think we had a choice to make based on all the information I have. We did what we had to do. We have to move on from that. Now it's about getting the top players. And when I say that, I don't refer to Quinn. He's a phenomenal player. We don't worry about him. But getting the top players to perform the way they have to. You have to have your impact players win games for you, not just be one of the guys. And that's part of the job of the coach, and that's something that the new coach is going to have to figure out.
So he's clearly talking about Suter and DeBrusque
there. Very savvy of Jim not to actually speak his name, but of course there was no veil there. Everybody knows. And we won't play the clip today, but we will coming up here. Allvin had an interesting answer when asked about Pettersson at the year-end availability, where he said, my opinion is if, it's the coach's responsibility to the message to the player, and if the message isn't getting through, then the coach has to find different ways to get that message through. And, when I heard Allvin say that, I said to myself, boy, if you're hearing that from Tocchet's ears, I wonder how that's landing, just because I am sure that Rick and his staff tried just about everything with Elias. You referenced it. Is he worried that Quinn Hughes is going to want out? And Blake, Rick and Quinn are so close, or we're led to believe they're so close. you do wonder whether there was some inside intel here. Whether in the exit meeting or just in a personal one-on-one communication, Rick's sizing up. Am I coming back? Am I moving on? Picks up the phone, calls Quinn and says, hey, Quinn, just want to know, how dedicated are you? And Quinn says, I'm going to leave my options open. I'm a free agent in a couple of years, and I'll tell you one thing, I ain't going through shit like I went through last year again. If that happens, I'm going to want out of here. If you hear that and you're Rick Tocchet, are you going to tie your wagon to a Vancouver Canucks team where Quinn Hughes may very well be playing his final season? Completely understand that.
Or less. Or they know. I mean, the Devils just bow out of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If the Canucks are as wise on that topic as Rick Tocchet appears to be, again, I don't want to cause panic here, but it feels like it's a TikTok on Quinn Hughes here, unless we get news to the contrary. Like, that's the last thing we heard. The players went first at the end of the year. The management went after. They told us that's what they're worried about.
So we have no concrete information or reporting right now that the Vancouver Canucks are taking calls on Quinn Hughes or sussing out what he might be able to return in a trade.
No evidence
for right now. There's no evidence of that. It is absolutely something that has to be a consideration, though. We will get more and more into that as the offseason.
And I want this abundantly clear and on the record, at least from my seat. I'm assuming from yours too. I enjoy covering Quinn Hughes. I am not chasing Quinn Hughes out of the city, everybody. I want to continue to cover Quinn Hughes. But if you are a Canucks fan that wants to cheer on a winning team sometime down the road, these are the kind of considerations the Vancouver Canucks have to take it. They have to consider. Otherwise, they are screwed. If you think it's egregious that Brock Besser's walking away with zero compensation towards the Canucks, what are you going to think if Quinn Hughes does?
Yeah. And it was Rutherford last week who dropped this stink bomb at the feet of Canucks fans to have to consider. And I thought it was the answer that drew the most concern from me yesterday as well when he was asked about Hughes's reaction to Tocchet moving on. Here's Jim.
Predictions would be with him wanting to stay.
Yeah, well, I hope he's playing golf because he usually returns my calls right away, and I called him within a half an hour after I talked to Rick. So he hasn't called me back yet. Knowing how he feels about the coach and that he's a sensitive guy, I would suspect that he feels like I do, that we're disappointed. But knowing the maturity of Quinn, he will make the adjustment necessary. But they did have a very strong relationship, a very good one. And Quinn had a lot of respect for him. And Talk had a lot of respect for Quinn. So there will definitely be an adjustment there.
Good superstar management there to instantly or shortly get on the phone or try to get on the phone with Quinn to let him know about the news before it dropped publicly. Players of that stature tend to appreciate that. I also thought it was a very honest answer with regards to how close they were and the task at hand. But I also know a lot of Canucks fans are hung up on the, well, he hasn't called me back and I hope he's on the golf course and are reading ominously into that. And I can understand that one as well. I also find myself wondering, the more Jim speaks on a Quinn Hughes departure or potential departure or doing everything to keep Quinn happy, I almost feel like, oh boy, is he speaking this thing, meaning a Hughes departure, into existence, Blake? Like the fuel on that fire every time he speaks about it. And I don't almost never chastise a person of Rutherford's stature and standing in an organization for speaking candidly and transparently. I tend to admire that more so than ever scorn that. But I do find my headspace wondering, God, like he's here he is again talking about issues where Quinn Hughes might be on one side and the organization's on the other. And I can get how that would be stressful for a dyed-in-the-wool, bleed-the-colors Canucks fan. So,
Yeah. Should be stressful.
does Rick doubt management's ability to get another top center? And it's more than that, right? Like Rutherford said, 3 forwards. But at minimum, a top 2 center. I can understand that from Tocchet's perspective as well. I mean, Rutherford effectively admitted we're going to pay an expensive price, but not doing so is even more expensive. And I thought that was a great answer from last Monday. He completely understands the assignment here.
But that sentence in isolation is not the problem, because that is completely attached to the Elias Pettersson question. Like, if you knew Elias Pettersson was coming back and would get you 85 to 95 points, I don't think that in and of itself is the scare for him, because
probably not, but I think it's still massive. Blake, in any other world, if you're just a generic NHL team out on the trade market for a top 2 center, that's a pretty big lift. That you're doing it in conjunction with, God, I hope the existing number 1 center gets back. God, I hope the superstar defenseman wants to stick around. Like, I can understand Tocchet looking around and going, fuck, even if Quinn wants to stay, even if Elias bounces back, we're still 2 to 3 forwards away from being a contending team.
To me, all roads still just lead back to Pettersson there, because the defense is a very reasonable defense, if not a very good defense.
How can all roads lead back? You know they need
hear me out. The defense is very good. I would say it's the top 3rd defense in the league. I would say it's a top 5 goaltending tandem in the league. So that's speaking Tocchet's language. That's cold. That's the comfort, the warm comfort for him. If he knows that they only need a second line center and not a first and a second line center, I think he's comfortable enough with Suter and with Hedl.
Well, Suter's a UFA, Blake.
Yeah.
Hedl's got the concussion.
I think you have to assume that Suter's coming back at this point.
Really?
Yeah, I would think so.
Oh, okay. See, because you say who's Suter and Hedl, and I see question mark.
Totally.
If I put myself in Tocchet's gates, those aren't solutions, those are question marks.
But if you had, again, my whole point was, if you knew with a bullet, if we could erase what we just saw from Elias Pettersson and pretend that we're coming off the season previous, I don't think the lack of second line center is the reason he's walking away from the job.
And I disagree, and I wholeheartedly disagree, because it is beyond second line center. It is 2 to 3 scoring forwards, and I think Rick also knows. God, my reputation as a defensive-minded coach. We never get goals off the rush. We don't generate shots. And now I'm relying on these guys to get me 2 to 3 forwards. No, if this goes poorly, I'm going to get the blame. My system's going to get the blame. I'm going to be branded as a coach who can't get the best out of offensive players, and I don't want that on my resume going forward.
But you're forgetting about the 50 extra points that I've already added from Pettersson. Like, that offense, those are goals. But you're going
to need more, Blake.
Oh, everybody wants more.
Like, Besser and Suter right now are UFA.
But that
so
cap
even
space
if
gets
you
used to somebody.
The 50 goals that they scored, you still, even if you add a whole bunch more from Elias, you still need more on top of that. To be a contender, maybe not to be a playoff team, but to be a contender.
Agree to disagree.
Okay. Stay tuned for that one throughout the spring and summer.
Well, there's no way of knowing, because, well, that's not Elias Pettersson. Elias Pettersson is the question mark. So
fair enough.
We can't find that out.
And then there are the specific peculiarities of this organization. Ownership requires a lot of managing up. And it's not just managing up. Ownership wants a personal relationship. Francesco loves hobnobbing and rubbing elbows with famous hockey players and coaches in and around Yaletown and beyond. And that would be fine, or that would be digestible, I think.
Less of an issue, yes.
For a lot of employees. Like, if a job requirement is having a social relationship with the boss, like, okay, I think a lot of people in the hockey world, and it is a boys club and it is, chummy, would be okay with that if ownership did everything and anything to support a winner. They won't finance a practice facility. If you're a head coach, there are 30 teams in the NHL with a practice facility and 31 with either a practice facility or plans.
Hardened plans to get one.
To have one in the near term.
Blueprinted plans.
Vancouver is the outlier there.
Yeah. And it's
so
for the only reason is money. The only reason is the unwillingness to spend.
Right.
That's the only reason.
Now, look, I doubted this earlier in the week, and I still don't think it was the biggest issue by any stretch, because I think Rick is also wise enough to know that it'd be hard to build a new practice facility and him be around to see it as head coach of the Vancouver Canucks. The NHL coaches don't have shelf lives like that, but maybe he had even some sort of temporary arrangement that is better than the status quo. I don't know. What I do know is that the Vancouver Canucks have, in an effort to not repeat mistakes of the past, and that is be paying coaches not to coach, and in one case with Travis Green and Bruce Boudreau, paying two coaches not to coach.
Yeah.
The Vancouver Canucks structured Rick Tocchet's contract with a team option. A team option that, at least for their president of hockey operations, they were never willing to enforce, to exercise. And so because of that, they created a moment of reflection here for Rick Tocchet, not to mention with the existing openings across the National Hockey League, that created a storm whereby they have lost a coach that they wanted to keep. I would like to think that that is the end of coaching options on the contracts going forward, right? You had one with Bruce, and your management group, who inherited him because you did it ass backwards, didn't want to keep Bruce, but were pretty much forced to keep Bruce because the option. And you had one with Tocchet, which you weren't willing to enforce, and so you lost him. Kept a coach you didn't want, lost a coach that you did want. That is the record now for Alvin and for Rutherford here, thanks to these options on the coaching contracts.
It's so bizarre, and again, because there's no CBA to enforce it, they're completely unenforceable. And if you're going to do it at all, do it after 2 years. They after a year and a half, both sides had to look at each other. That would have been the sort of the early off ramp of, I don't think this is for either one of us. Let's depart. But after 2.5 years, it's such an awkward time.
Yeah.
That of course it wasn't going to be enforced.
Yeah. And look, he contemplates, Tocchet is sitting there contemplating the offer that, at least for year one, replaced the option. After a year where his goaltender coach, one of the best in the business, Ian Clark, is demoted by Jim Rutherford because his physical limitations prevent him from getting on the ice. Mm-hmm. So you lost Clarkie to a large extent. Thatcher Demko and Dakota Joshua are unavailable for training camp and into the season for different reasons, but needless to say, two key players who weren't there from the jump. Defense you were handed that was not good enough, and Rick nobly took some responsibility for that, suggesting that he had some say in personnel. But end of the day, Alvin makes decisions, Tocchet makes suggestions on free agents. We're able to fix it, but at mighty cost. You have JT's temper tantrum after getting benched against Nashville, the ensuing feud between Miller and Pettersson, the Miller trade, the lack of a second or even first-line center after that deal, and management's preference, we think, to keep Elias and see if they can rehabilitate him. I mean, you go through all of that, I can understand why he arrived at the decision. 115, 71, and 27 is the record for Rick Tocchet as head coach of the Vancouver Canucks. That includes playoffs over 2.5 seasons. his .608 winning percentage in the regular season.
Only the lozenge is better.
Only the lozenge. En français.
And again, that's what makes this astounding. So this guy's had success with this organization. And this is what really staples it down to his view of the highway ahead. The guy's had success. He's got hardware in his trophy case on the job that he's done in just the 2.5 years.
Like the lozenge.
Yeah. And he's looking down the road going, yeah, not for me.
Yeah.
I'm not driving down that highway. Wow.
6th in regular season victories, 5th in total victories if you add the playoff wins. This is out of 21 coaches all time for the Vancouver Canucks. He got the Canucks into the true Stanley Cup playoffs for the first time since 2015. Of course, there was the expanded bubble field in 2020. A reminder, Canucks would not have qualified for that field in a traditional 16-team playoff. And he got him into the second round for the first time since 2011. Again, if you discount the bubble playoffs of 2020. The other thing here is this is a massive face loss for Jim Rutherford and Patrick Allvin. They staked so much of their program, of their plan, on Rick Tocchet. And there was an insightful tweet from Rachel Dory on this matter yesterday, former Canucks employee. And yes, Rachel is at odds with the organization, filed a human rights complaint against Patrick Allvin and Emily Castengay after what she felt was unfair treatment. She is very much a Bruce Boudreau loyalist. But I think Rachel's also right with this tweet. They treated Bruce terribly, did everything they could to push him out and make his life uncomfortable in the final stretch to sell the fans on a future culture built around Tocchet, a less successful coach. Now he leaves them. A bad look. A bad look then, looks even worse now. Bruce deserved better. Karma. Yeah, I can understand how some people see it that way.
Yeah,
absolutely. Lastly here or shouldn't say lastly, but in terms of the timeline here, Rutherford said yesterday that he got a sneaky suspicion a week ago. Here's Jim.
Well, I'm surprised because, like I said in my opening statement, all our talks were about, what happened during the season, what Toc wants to do different, what he's going to do with each player, going to go over to Sweden to check on PD in the summertime, all stuff like that. But it did get to a point, I would say probably a week ago, where I started thinking, well, we keep talking about what's going to go on, but we don't have the commitment yet. And at that point, I started thinking, he's not quite sure. And I wasn't sure why, because of how positive everything was going. But then when he talked to me today, and I'm not going to get into that, that's really his business. But with him and I being friends for as long as we have, he talked to me about some of the things he's dealing with. And he just said, for personal reasons, I will have a very tough time doing the job I need to do.
And look, we don't know what those personal reasons are. They could be far more extensive than anything that has been, well, nothing's been reported on it. So, and look, I also think it's unfair to castigate Rick for going down the road of next year with the Vancouver Canucks. Number one, when you're considering a job or you're in the job, and I guess Rick was a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. Absolutely. You're looking at next steps, right? How we get better.
Of course.
Especially if you're keeping your options open, you're looking at all of that. It is not just a worthy exercise, it's necessary information in terms of making the decision. Because if you do make the decision to return, you want to make sure you're on the same page with your superiors. So, very perceptive of Jim that it finally got to that moment for him where he worried about, okay, I don't actually have a commitment. And also thorough on Tocchet's part. Now, this is an organizational L. Of that, there's no doubt.
But a chance for a win.
Well, that's
a chance
it.
for a win.
So,
I want to get to that, but first let's talk about Cinco de Mayo at Yellow Dog, shall we? Before we get there, head down to Yellow Dog Brewing's Port Moody tasting room on Monday, May 5th for a little taste of Cinco de Mayo. Yellow Dog Spirits margarita flights will be on special all day, so come try some specialty flavors available for the one day only on Cinco de Mayo.
Love me some Cinco de Mayo. Usually hit up Los Marks and Kits.
So Tochet's a good coach.
Yes.
But they do have the chance to get a better coach.
This was going to be my ode to Blake Price because he hasn't been as big a Rick Tocchet fan as I have. And I did want to give somebody, everybody watching and listening here, some degree of uplifting and positivity. The notion that this could be a blessing in disguise. And look, right now it is a brand crisis. That is irrefutable. The Vancouver Canucks under Mike Gillis and Alain Vigneault and Chris Zimmerman and Victor DeBonis on the business side were a best-in-class organization. Sellout streak that went years and years and years, leading the National Hockey League on sports science and fatigue management and all the areas that the Gillis regime led the leading the league on digital and all the other assorted activities of a professional sports club. They were such a best-in-class franchise that even NBA Commissioner David Stern talked about how well-run they were.
Okay,
they have fallen a long, long way, but
it's not a blessing in disguise because they were not in any dire trouble under Rick Tocchet. They weren't going down a terrible road, but they also weren't going down a spectacular road. So there are a lot of really good coaches out there right now. There is maybe the possibility for more if you think that John Cooper's in any trouble with a loss tonight. They have had some good defensive successes, but how much of that is on goaltending? They've not had great offensive successes under Rick Tocchet. They've had a stagnant offensive attack that was figured out pretty quickly in the early goings of last year, and since then has been near the bottom of the league, if not the bottom of the league, in terms of attack. He did not know how to use a lot of offensive pieces. A guy like Kuzmenko seems to be doing just fine in a system down in Los Angeles. Elias Pettersson has hit rock bottom. So there's been a lot of symptoms of something going wrong within the organization on the ice, in addition to just in the room. The overtime record. They clearly did not figure out overtime until it was far too late. Their last 10 games overtime were fine, but my goodness, that cost them the playoffs. Yep. If they have a winning record in overtime, their regulation losses are actually really good. Like they did not lose in regulation that much. They're near all the playoff teams, if not above some playoff teams in regulation losses. But they didn't find a way to win those games. And is that on the coaching? So there's a lot of times, a lot of points here where they have room for improvement and where somebody else can come in with a new set of eyes and say, okay, that all works great. Why didn't this work? And we'll have new ideas. And Rick actually criticized himself in the year end, saying, I didn't adjust enough. So there is a way.
He was willing to be introspective publicly with us and acknowledged a lot of mistakes. To me, that was part of Rick's charm.
Credit to Rick that he didn't allow the floor to get too low. The floor, again, they were a fine team this year.
See, I thought you were going down the road of who knows. They may hire a hell of a coach now, or they affect the space-time continuum here. And they're now onto a branch where they stumble upon great success, and we look back and go, remember when we were all sweating losing Tocchet as a head coach?
I mean, you don't know until you're in it. I still, here's the problem I still don't have because of the runway left. No matter how successful they are next season, is that enough for Quinn Hughes? It comes back to that.
Oh, for sure.
Honestly,
for sure.
If they go 2 rounds deep next year, folks.
Yeah.
Which would be an unbelievable achievement given where we are right in this day. If I told you they got to the second round next year, that would be incredible storylines. Is that going to be enough to satiate Quinn Hughes and say, I don't want to play with my brothers just yet?
Well,
I find it hard to believe.
I hear what you're saying, and I understand how daunting and ominous that is. I also would remind you the Colorado Avalanche with Matt Duchene, the Ottawa Senators with Erik Karlsson moved out superstars, moved out pieces that fans in those markets went, oh, my God. And, well, both of them won the trades. One of them has won a cup since.
Mm-hmm. And,
in part because the proceeds of that trade.
And
so,
I don't think the Sens' inability to bounce is necessarily just due to that trade. It's,
Well, and the Sens are not done there either, right? Because some of the proceeds of that Karlsson trade are still playing for them and in this case, in round one of the playoffs. So Manny Malhotra and Peter Laviolette are candidates. Rutherford acknowledged that yesterday. Manny, of course, is coaching the Abbotsford Canucks in the second round of the AHL playoffs. They get going Thursday, tomorrow, Coachella Valley. And Peter Laviolette has just been let go as the head coach of the New York Rangers. There is history there between Rutherford and Laviolette. Hired him in Carolina. They won a Stanley Cup. Mike Sullivan is not a candidate, according to Rutherford, who says he apparently wants to stay east. I brought this name up last week, and I think is also worth mentioning here. Pittsburgh Penguins assistant Mike Vellucci. He has a long history with Jim Rutherford, going back to their days with the, I believe Jim was an equity partner at one point of the Plymouth Whalers of the OHL, and Vellucci was involved in that organization, was then involved in the Carolina organization and in the Pittsburgh organization. So there's just three names that are out there, and the reporting may come fast and furious. There are even more.
I think
really
I think people will lose their minds if it's Mike Vellucci.
Oh, of course they would, because they don't know him,
right?
And they'll want an established coach. The other thing I would say is that this presents an opportunity for the Vancouver Canucks, and good organizations do this all the time. You cast a wide net, you interview a lot of people, and you get a lot of counterintelligence back on your franchise from your opponents.
Yep.
That would be wise here, because I do think the Vancouver Canucks have some soul searching to do. And I do think the more information, the better here, after having to deal with this dagger of the coach you want walking away. Rutherford was asked about why candidates would want the job. Here's what he said.
From the Canucks' point of view, they probably want to come here because they like where we practice. They might want to come here because they see what our defense is and what our goalies are. They could see what we all talk about. We have to make our forwards better. We have to have more balance. I believe around the league, people feel that it's a good working relationship within our hockey group here. So there's lots of reasons to come here.
For the record, that joke landed better with me than it did with the room. That was a very awkward moment of silence as people were processing what he was getting at there. Very dry delivery, Jim. Very Bob Uecker.
I think if it came later, maybe it would have landed better.
I think there's a school of thought, oh, my God, Jim, read the room. We've just been rejected by your coach of choice.
Yeah.
And here they're making... Honestly, I'm of the opinion, good on you for keeping your sense of humor, Jim. Like, we sometimes act like this is the most serious business in the world. It's a fucking child's game. Like it's pro sports.
Yeah.
Like it should be fun. And
it should be. You're right.
It really should be fun.
Has it been?
Nah. So I actually appreciated the humor there, and he's spoken himself and the organization in the eye. What I do wonder, though, is after the answer he gave last week on the practice facility, and you'll remember, he started that one with humor too, right? Oh, please don't ask me. Do we have to talk about the practice facility? which I got because he knew he had no ground to stand on, right? Like he knew, he had said some things and promised some things that he just didn't deliver on the practice facility. And I think we also all know it's not his fault. I do wonder how that joke landed it with ownership yesterday. Because rich guys don't like to be the butt of jokes. And I wonder if old Jimmy here, old Straight Talk, is getting a little too close to rubbing Aquilini noses in this now and off-putting them.
I don't. Can
the rest of the answer, I mean. Okay.
But does Jim Rutherford also, though, feel like he's got the longest leash in the world right now? Because if by chance they got so mad at him that they would turf him, like you think the brand's in disarray right now.
Oh, for sure. But, Blake, they fired franchise icon Trevor Linden when he wanted to rebuild. So they have been down that road before.
Yeah.
You fire Trevor Linden, you can fire Jim Rutherford, especially 76-year-old Jim Rutherford, who is dropping truth bombs left, right, and center. And I'm sure making you squirm to begin with.
Well,
some of the things he's saying.
Speaking of truth bombs, we never really addressed it head on.
Huh.
The Hughes phoning me back part, like from the never mind the content of it.
Yeah.
From the decision, and again, there's a little bit of a joke in there. I think he's trying to be light with it as well.
Yes,
but
for sure.
But again, this isn't Pittsburgh. And again, not to put down Pittsburgh NHL media, but maybe that would have flown and they just would have given that like nothing. We're going to look at that and go, why are you telling us that?
So I can understand Worry Wertz reading into that and wondering, is Quinn ghosting him?
By the way, he Instagrammed later from the New York Knicks game. It looks like he was at the Knicks game with his agent, Pat Brisson.
I'm going to take it as he was probably engaged in something of longer than 30 minutes and got back to Jim after he was disengaged from whatever that activity was.
But again,
like, to me, that is the really simple, most likely answer there.
Right, but
we read a lot of things into a lot of shit into a lot of things in this job. I'm not reading much into that.
But again, Jim led people there. Jim did it. Jim
I
said it's really weird because he always phones me back and he didn't. That's what Jim said. That's not what people thought. That's what he said.
Well,
it is.
Again, but it's the summer. Are players stopping workouts to call backs? No, they're not.
But
are people calling, if you're on the golf course, you're 4.5 hours, are you calling? No, you're probably not.
But again, the content is fine. If he had said,
if you're on a plane.
Matt, tell me the difference. I called Quinn. I have not heard back, but we will have a discussion on it.
Yeah.
If he says that, there's no discussion of what he said there.
I completely agree, Blake. I also that is not a Chicken Little moment for me in the least.
But again, why doesn't he realize that we can hear his outside voice? Why doesn't he realize that him saying it's weird he didn't phone me back, we can hear that, Jim?
Blake, he's 76 years old with 3 cup rings, and he's in the Hockey Hall of Fame. He's done giving Fs.
Abundantly clear. Yeah.
Have you not been paying attention here over the last 2.5 years?
But they also
Jim Rutherford is going to say what comes to Jim Rutherford's mind. There was one moment in his tenure where he said, he even told us, now I got to zip it. Well, he's done zipping it. He is unzipped.
He is unzipped. He just can't be upset then when people take things like that and run with it. You did it.
Mm-hmm. And honestly, if this gets worse from here, Francesco managing a first-time GM, we've seen that story before, can absolutely see the redux with Alvin. Stanley Cup playoffs. Look, Canucks fans, I know it's tough right now. Take some solace. The Toronto Maple Leafs are in the midst of blowing another first-round series. This is extraordinary.
In the midst, are they really?
Well,
still some ways to go.
They still have 2 cracks at this.
Yeah.
But look at the graphic here from Big Head Hockey. Toronto in closeout playoff games in the Austin Matthews era. 1 win, 13 losses. 1-13 with a chance to finish an opponent off. The only win there is against the Tampa Bay Lightning in Game 6 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Every other one. They had a pretty lousy Montreal team, down 3-1 in 2021 in the bubble. Couldn't close it out. Couldn't close out Columbus in 2020.
Of course.
We all know the Bostons. Yeah, of course. The Bostons, plural. And now we're in the midst against their provincial rival Ottawa Senators, who, again, lost 3 games in overtime. We're very close in that series.
Yeah.
Deserve so much better than being down 0-3. LA now down 3-2 to Edmonton.
They deserve better, too.
Honestly.
You are your record, but they deserve better.
He made his bed, but I found myself with sympathy for Jim Hiller, the LA Kings coach from Port Alberni. This series turned on your ridiculous goaltender interference challenge. And now you're staring down the barrel of losing to Edmonton for a 4th consecutive postseason. And Carolina, first team into the second round, they beat Jersey, come back in the hockey game and beat Jersey. And Rod Brindamore, Rod the Bod from Campbell River, the first coach to win a playoff series in his first 7 seasons on the bench. I like what, I think it was Sarah Valley said it.
About Pat Burns?
No, just making the playoffs 7 years in a row if you're a head coach. That's damn good. Winning the first round all 7 years? And I was wondering about this year's team, Blake. They made the big push for Rantanen. Then they had to move on Rantanen. Boy, that's got to unsettle the group. Still don't love their goaltending. Anderson is still prone to injury or ailments at the wrong time, and yet there they are into the Eastern Conference second round.
Sarah Valley went on to reference that Burns won at least 1 round in each of his first 6 seasons, which is incredible.
But was that with multiple franchises?
Multiple franchises. Yeah. But my point there is Burns is revered. Mm-hmm. You know, he is a legend. Rod Brindamore just made himself into now a coaching legend.
Wow. I mean, it's hard to...
Like, I know do you need multiple rings to sort of cement that, or is this good enough? Like, if you're Mr. I mean,
I think you need rings.
Yeah.
Pat Burns has a ring.
Yeah.
I think you need rings.
Yeah, your risk of being Marty Schottenheimer. Otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Let's get to our menu. It's brought to you by Greta, a fantastic spot to catch all the games, home and away, pregame, postgame. You were steps from the arena or the stadium. They have the amazing street food menu and an arcade unlike any other. Go try Pop-A-Shot, air hockey. And they have some vintage ones there as well. NBA Jam.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of fun
Popular
to be
one.
had at Greta. 50 West
Mrs.
Cordova.
Pac-Man.
Yes, drink specials weekly. Let the games begin. Gilman and then Corrado. Is that where we're going here?
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll discuss the Whitecaps
Both
in Miami.
Today, by the way, spectacular. Such great insight from these two gentlemen.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow. I'll send them a note. Matt didn't like what you brought today.
No, please don't do that. Because Gilman sweats it sometimes. More on the Whitecaps, the BC Lions draft, and baseball later in the program. Time now for our Bet365 bets of the day. This segment proudly brought to you by Bet365. Fire away because I forget what I was on yesterday.
I'm going, and I got mine, Kuzmenko scoring, bada boom. I'm going with a little less cheddar here. But I'm going to go with the Team USA bench player, Kyle Connor. Scores in big games. It's a big one for Winnipeg. Plus 135 on the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
Jets, Jets.
So hear my mouth on this one. Miami and the Whitecaps tonight. Vancouver plus 425 to win. Draw plus 350. Vancouver has cushion because they have the 2 goals. It's going to be really hard to beat Miami twice in a row with Messi going.
They can lose
90.
and win, right? So
they can lose and win. I don't normally take minus 188 favorites, but in this case, because of the specific rules here on the tie and advancing,
a 2-1, a 3-1 loss. Whitecaps
it
still
wins the
advance.
bet, and the Whitecaps still advance.
Yeah.
So giddy up. Want to get in on the action for the Stanley Cup playoffs at Bet365. They got you from game props, player props, totals, money line. You can even bet on futures like series winners, conference champions, Stanley Cup champions, so much more. Whatever your bet, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Download the app. Get in on the game. An official partner of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Must be 19 or older. Lawrence Gilman coming up next. Harrison Price, historic week for the Canucks. And we're at the historic wall. So we're making history, Blake Price.
A history all the time. Mm-hmm. You know who's also made some great history?
You can make some history for yourself as well by visiting your nearest Pacific Toyota dealer.
Well, you can join history. Who's done electric better than the fine folks at Toyota? Your Pacific Toyota dealers want you to experience the latest addition to the historic lineup in the electric part of the Toyota division, and that is the BZ4X. Go take one for a test drive. You'll love it. Super fun to drive. It's zippy. It doesn't require regular lanes. That means the HOV lanes have you zooming past all the traffic and the gas stations. It's a lot of fun, folks. They just ask that you go and give it a ride. Go see how it drives. Go see how it feels. And right now, you get up to $6,500 in rebates and incentives, 0.99% financing, APR over 36 months. ShopToyota.ca.
Lawrence Gilman is the former assistant general manager of the Vancouver Canucks, NHL executive with the Leafs, Jets, and Coyotes. He joins us on Wednesdays, and we've been at no loss, my friend, for discussion points and even at the management level here with these Vancouver Canucks. Thanks for taking the time, Lawrence. First question, what did you make of Tocchet's departure and his explanation?
Well, in the last week or so, the silence became deafening to me. And when there was such inactivity, I began to switch my position in that I had thought that Rick Tocchet and the Canucks were going to come to an agreement. But after the press conference of last week where, amongst other things, the Quinn Hughes issue came up, and Rick Tocchet was nowhere to be seen. I began to figure out that this is probably not going to end with a consummated agreement. And if you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, you've got the reigning Jack Adams Trophy winning coach, and coming off a season of dysfunction of epic proportion. You got a team that has serious questions down the middle of its lineup. You got a number one center that didn't perform as a number one center. You don't have a number two center, a bona fide number two center. Filipino question mark. You don't know what's happening with Pius Suter. Your defense and your goaltending are fine, but your number one player, who's one of the best defensemen in the National Hockey League, has pretty much put the organization on notice that he's not going to stick around in the next 3 years if the team isn't competitive. At the same time, you got 6 other coaching vacancies in the National Hockey League, 3 of which are U.S.-based Original Six franchises. And Rick Tocchet has to be arguably the number 2 candidate for any of those jobs behind Mike Sullivan. So if you're him, are you really going to fix your wagon to the situation that you have in Vancouver for the next 4, 5, 6 years, whatever the case may be? Or are you going to leverage the work that you've done in the last couple of years and the acknowledgments of such, and go out and find a place that's going to be more stable and has better upside?
Let me just pick up on something you said. Do you think Rutherford laying the Hughes issue bare last week played into this decision?
I don't know that it necessarily, the fact that Jim Rutherford spoke about it publicly, I don't know that it necessarily, swayed Rick Tocchet. I think the fact that clearly they have an issue with this player that they know about, and Rutherford's mentioning it, alluded or revealed that fact. I think that was not a small factor at all in Rick Tocchet's decision to not, commit long term to the Vancouver Canucks.
I'm 40% there, and I'm 40% general dysfunction. Like he has to feel that while this year was particularly bad, that he could see similar stuff coming down the pike here with this organization. Like, I don't think he would necessarily look at this and go, this was a bad year, but it all went to pot. It'll be better this year. Like, I would bet he fears what is next around this corner.
Well, we talked about that a little bit last week in my segment with you guys, where they have their work cut out for them. They really do. To solidify their team up front, and particularly down the middle, is no small feat. And it's not coming, and Jim Rutherford stated, it's not coming in the form of free agency. So the only other way it's going to happen is by trading something, and you're not getting players of that significance to your roster without giving up something of significance from your organization. And, it's like I said, that's a tall order. And if you're him and you're assessing the lay of the land, it's probably a better option to go see what else is out there. And if what Jim Rutherford said is true, and there's no reason to believe he wasn't telling the truth because he speaks incredibly candidly. Rick Tocchet wants to be on the eastern side of the United States. That's where his family is located. And it makes sense. There's some great coaching opportunities that exist in eastern cities.
The tone is set at the top of any company, any organization. Is the worst thing that happened to the Francesco Aquilini ownership the success that you guys had? That, a handful of years after he puts his money into this company, they have profound success and maybe think that that's the norm and that it's easy and that they know how to do this now, that they know. Did that scar ownership and create a monster, if you will, in terms of how they run this team from there on in?
Well, I can't really answer that. I do think, I made the joke alluding to the fact that, we did have a lot of success and there wasn't a whole lot of missing the playoffs when we were there. But the fact is, there has been a great deal of instability in that organization for whatever it's been, 10 years or so now. We've gone through 4 coaches in the last 5 or 6 years, whatever it's been.
4 years, yeah.
You've 2 different general managers now, and you got a president of hockey operations come and go, and you got a revolving door on the dressing room. So it's clearly instability isn't something that organizations that have success genuinely elicit. And in this case, it probably factored into Rick Tocchet's decision, but again, I can't really speak for him.
What stuck out for you in Jim Rutherford's explanation yesterday?
In some sense, I felt that there was like a little bit of bewilderment on his behalf. Like, where do we turn to here? I know he put on a brave face, and you have to do that in this business. But this is a very, very critical event. In a year of a number of critical events that have befallen this, this hockey operations department, and you put on a brave face and you move forward. But obviously, he expressed disappointment that Rick Tocchet was leaving. I certainly feel that was genuine. And he knows that they have a big task that they, quite frankly, need to get right. They need to get the right person, the right coach in place so that they can shepherd this team through the choppy waters that appear to be ahead of them.
I got a text yesterday from one of you people, and by you people, I mean a lawyer, who said to me, well, he always calls us
true,
you people. I'm just
Turnabout is fair play.
to you people.
Yeah.
A lawyer who said to me, why in the hell would they have structured this contract with an option if they weren't prepared to enforce it, particularly since they structured the Boudreau contract with an option, and that proved messy for them in the end as well. Do you have any explanation there, lawyer to lawyer? Called to the Manitoba and North Dakota bar, if I'm not mistaken, Lawrence.
Minnesota bar.
Minnesota, my bad. I'll put
Let's
myself
get that
on.
right.
Okay.
Which I'm currently still a member of. So
If there are lakes nearby, he's called to that bar.
I don't know that I've ever been involved in a coaching contract that had an option. But, it does happen from time to time, but it definitely complicated things. I think if they had to go back in time, they would have wished that option year was an additional fixed year, and it wouldn't, they wouldn't be in the pickle that they're in today. But there's lots of times organizations do seek options. I have signed contracts where the club has had an option on me, and I have experienced having those options exercised when I wasn't thrilled about it. But I'm not a coach in the National Hockey League, and again, I said this to you people multiple times. I just don't believe you can have a coach in a Canadian market on a 1-year contract. It just doesn't lend itself to success within the team and the dressing room.
You said that you thought that Tocchet would be number 2 on a lot of those spots. But of course, now the Vancouver Canucks are in that market now, shopping in the same pools that the likes of the New York Rangers and such are shopping for. Does anybody, if you're the manager, if you're Jim Rutherford right now, does anybody get you excited about coaching your team right now, or should everybody immediately become fans of the Florida Panthers in hopes that John Cooper shakes free, which I don't actually believe would happen, but some people are putting that out there.
Well, John Cooper might shake free, but again, is John Cooper going to come to the Vancouver Canucks and fix his wagon to the instability that currently exists? I don't know what they're going to do. I think you clearly have to, again, Jim Rutherford is a veteran hockey manager. He's not going to do anything rash. He's not going to do anything quickly, although, you are competing with 6 other teams in terms of, candidates that are out there.
And maybe more soon, right? Maybe more.
For sure. And it's a critical hire in the sense that you need someone who's going to be a leader and be able to direct these players and this team through what is potentially going to be an unstable situation. I'm certain they'll fix some aspects of their center ice position. I mean, they'll get centers for sure. How competent they're going to be, who knows? But you're definitely going to want a leader, particularly after all the dressing room drama and things that happened this last year. You're going to want someone who's of strong moral fiber and character to lead this group going forward.
You have personal experience with Manny Malhotra. He's running the Abbotsford Canucks right now, has them in the second round of the playoffs, and he was there in Toronto as well as an assistant. A word or two on whether or not you think Manny is ready, because he was named as a candidate yesterday.
Well, I've said before, I think Manny will coach in the National Hockey League at some point. Being candid, my appetite for risk on putting in a coach that does not have that much head coaching experience into a position such as the Canucks at this point in time, I think has a higher degree of a risk than I would be comfortable with. I would also caution Manny that, if I were representing him, that you don't necessarily want to take the first one offered to you. You want to take the right one offered to you. And as I've said before, like players, coaches don't get hurt by staying in the American Hockey League an extra year. So I think if I were involved in the process, I think you obviously have to consider Manny and you have to talk to him, but I don't think it's in Manny's best interest or the Canucks' best interest to necessarily have him as a head coach at this time. But again, let me state, I fully believe that Manny will be a coach in the National Hockey League at some point in his future.
What about Peter Laviolette? Jim Rutherford said, quote, "It's a good name," when it was brought up to him yesterday.
Well, I watched John Shannon on your podcast yesterday, and I feel the same way he does. He's not my cup of tea in terms of a coach and his coaching style and what I've seen and heard from him. But he is a veteran coach. He is a Stanley Cup winning coach, and I'm not. So he's definitely a legitimate coach, and he would definitely have grabbed the attention of the players. That's for certain.
How much are you worried about catering to the players? Like, you do want to cater to the players, but you also don't want the inmates running the asylum per se. What's the tone that you want to strike here with this coach in terms of making sure that, gets along with Elias Pettersson, maybe gets the best out of Elias Pettersson, but, isn't a coddler per se as well?
Well, today's modern coach is far different than the historical gruff, NHL coach that operates out of fear. You can
just say Mike Babcock if you want. It's all right.
You can't.
It's a safe space.
You can't deal with modern players like that today. You have to be a communicator. You have to get them to buy in. Those are key elements to a successful coach and a successful coaching staff. Because I don't want to undersell the importance of the assistant coaches, because they complement the head coach, and you can get a head coach that is weak in some areas and surround him with assistants that are strong in others. And you have to have a strong staff all the way around. Again, I think, I've said it to you many times. I believe strongly players play, coaches coach, managers manage, and owners own. So I wouldn't be utilizing the players in the selection of the coach, but you have to keep in mind that you need someone who's going to get the most out of their players, whether that's Elias Pettersson or whether that's Quinn Hughes or whether that's anybody else for that matter.
Lawrence, how worried should a Canucks fan be right now?
Well, this has been a chaotic season for them. And, there's a gaping hole currently as it sits in the roster in one of the most critically important areas, which is your center ice position. They have to fix the problem with their number one center, which I've maintained. I believe that is certainly something that they're capable of. But you need to go out and, get two centers as of right now. If you're assuming that, Chytil is injured and, may not come back, although I suspect he will. And you don't have a third center. They, as I've said multiple times, they have their work cut out for them. They don't look, absent those maneuvers, they don't appear to be a playoff team next year as they sit today. So would I be concerned if I were a fan? I wouldn't be happy about their fortunes at this point in time. But again, you have solid management in place that it's not their first rodeo, as I've said, again, multiple times, and that they will execute and improve the hockey club over the summer. As I said, they know what the issues are in front of them. I thought Jim Rutherford last week articulated that very, very clearly. They have a plan, and now they just need to go out and execute on it.
Nothing's impossible, but given where they are right now, if they make the playoffs next year, is that an impressive feat, given where they are right now?
I would say so. You've got teams below the playoff line that are improving rapidly. Calgary came pretty much out of nowhere to make the playoffs. The Anaheim Ducks were pretty good in the latter part of the season. And the teams above them, I don't necessarily see falling out of the race anytime soon. So they do have their work cut out for them. But, if they have a healthy goaltending for the entire season, they clearly improved their defense this past year. Canucks fans should feel very good about that. But they've got to hit right on the center ice position going forward. And they need other forwards as well, particularly if they let Brock Besser and his 25 to 30 goals walk out the door.
This is less of a question, Lawrence. I'm just going to throw a whole bunch of facts at you, and then you respond as you want to respond. But JPAT tweeted this yesterday. 1 year ago, in the second round of the playoffs, taking the Oilers to the brink with a third-string goaltender, the Norris and Jack Adams winner, 6 All-Stars, 2 top 2 centermen amongst those All-Stars, rehabilitated Brock Besser and Connor Garland, both having fantastic seasons, and, of course, Thatcher Demko the next season. A year from now, look where they're at.
Well, it's a shocking, fall for sure. And again, some of it was circumstantial. Injuries played a role without a doubt. Obviously what occurred in their dressing room was something that's highly irregular and rarely occurs in professional sport or in our industry. I'd say 2 years ago or last season, everything that could go right went right. And this year it seemed that everything that could go wrong went wrong. So I don't think, at any given point in time, a team is never as good or as bad as it's playing at that particular moment in time. And, a year ago, they probably weren't as good as they actually performed. And this year, I don't think they're as bad as they performed. So going into next season, hope springs eternal, right? In training camps. So they make a few moves here and there. There isn't any reason they can't be a competitive team and at least competing for a Stanley Cup playoff position next season.
We'll probably drill down on this at some point later. And this seems completely rash, but we're just hear us out because we've tried to grapple with this very uncomfortable question. Is there any part of you that would consider, if you're the manager here, trading Quinn Hughes now, this summer, rather than trying to salvage all this over the course of the next 12 months?
Well, it depends on what actually has transpired between the player and the organization. And if
only they know for sure.
If you feel pretty strongly that this guy's going to walk out the door in 2 years, it would behoove you to at least listen. Particularly if the New Jersey Devils, let's say, come knocking and say, okay, we're interested in taking him. How can we frame this? Because you're going to get more for him now than you're going to get.
That's it.
Right. So, but that being said, and this has been said by many people, this is the best defenseman that's ever played for the Vancouver Canucks.
100%.
It's a pretty strong, move to decide that you're going to part ways with that player because, the old adage is he who gets the best player wins the trade. And, you might get a bushel of assets, but you are giving up like a franchise player in that transaction.
Media gets portrayed as, trying to get guys out of the city all the time. This is the opposite of that. No one's trying to get this guy out of the city, but
not media.
Yeah.
You people.
That's right.
I think that's a great expression. And by the way, I borrowed
it's
it
Pat
from
Quinn's.
Pat Quinn.
It's Pat Quinn's. It's Pat Quinn's. I first encountered it when I was covering him with the Leafs, although it may have predated his tenure with coaching the Leafs. It may have been a Vancouver thing or an LA thing, or even a Philly thing going way back. When the questions were coming and getting a little hotter, Pat would rear back and drop a "you people" at the scrum. And it was, and in his later years, when he was a little more grandfatherly after his heart scare and what, it was usually a moment of great amusement for everyone. In the early days, it was a little more grizzly bear. I can attest to that. Anyways, we'll talk to you and your people next Wednesday. Thank you, Lawrence. Appreciate this.
Thanks, guys.
Let's secure some price from the historic Wall Center.
Do you have my bottle of Bogey Juice?
No.
That looks like my bottle of Bogey Juice.
Looks like a bottle of Bogey Juice. I don't see Blake Price's name on this.
You see, Bogey Juice does come in the single serving that fit comfortably inside your golf bag, making sure that every time you do lip out that putt or maybe
chip in for a bogey because you've really screwed it up to there.
Or if you want to take the really negative, maybe the bogey is actually still when you're in the trap and you are nowhere near the hole yet.
Or maybe you're just happy with bogey golf, like that your goal is to go out there and shoot 90.
However you get there, it comes in small format. It comes in large because you pour that over some soda with some ice on a hot summer day, the ginger, the apple, the hot top shelf vodka. It tastes pretty delicious. Find yours at bogeyjuice.com. Use the code SP15, get your 15% off, and join the new tradition, Bogey Juice.
Frank Corrado is a former Vancouver Canuck and a TSN hockey analyst, and he joins us on Wednesdays. How are you?
I'm good, fellas. What's going on over there? How we doing? Everyone hanging in?
It's a sunshine. Literally, the sun did come up today.
Okay, good.
It was out yesterday, too.
It was. It's been a beautiful week despite the sky falling around this hockey club.
Oh, boy. Yeah, there's some stuff, man, happening.
I remember when you and O'Neill would text us during the Jim Benning era and going gosh. What is going on there? Like, what is happening? And we'd be like, I don't know. It's just so crazy. And then this administration came in, Frank, and those texts disappeared.
Well,
For a time.
frankly, I think O'Neill has just given up. Like every answer I gave him was inadequate, and he went, "Okay, I'm not going to waste my time with this anymore."
But
Yeah.
I wouldn't be
If you
surprised.
see Jeff, tell him. I'm waiting to hear from him. It's
Yeah.
been a while.
It's amazing what winning can do, right? Like
Yep.
the team has success, and so many things just don't matter at that point. Whatever was happening with Pettersson and Miller didn't matter. Team was winning. We're not thinking about that. We're not talking about that. And when the team loses and the team struggles, all of a sudden there's a fallout on a number of different fronts, and we're kind of seeing that right now where Miller left. Now the coach is gone. Or there's going to be changes at some point with the group. You would have to think the status of the best player moving forward. Like there's a few dominoes have kind of dropped, but it's almost like we're halfway through the whole chain of it before we get to see what the end results are.
People love to go to the top, whether that means ownership or Jim Rutherford and Patrick Oveen, wherever you denote the top is, because one's the top of hockey ops, one's the top. But like we said when these guys came in after the craziness of the Jim Benning era, different kind of crazy. We said the adults are in the room. It feels like it felt like, okay, these guys, tried and true NHL executives. There's some normalcy being restored to the organization. But then this past year has happened. Do you absolve to any degree the coach and the manager, or you can tackle it individually? Like, was this just too crazy in the locker room? Because the guys that we thought were the adults in the room, they clearly couldn't control it. Rick Tocchet, who seems very much like an adult in the room, he couldn't control it, and he sort of washed his hands going, I'm not coming back because of all this. Was it just too crazy in the room? Is that it?
Okay, let's go back to the first point you made about, the Benning era finishing and these guys coming in and being the adults in the room. Like at the time, correct me if I'm wrong, but when these guys took over, there would have been a narrative brewing that, man, there's some mess to clean up here. Is there not?
Yes.
Like they
Yes.
didn't inherit a great situation. And to their credit, they did a great job of turning this thing around very quickly, and they added the skill that they needed on the blue line. They leveraged some draft picks, and all of a sudden this team was the best in the Pacific last year, and it was a great story. And you almost forgot about what had been left over and the desire to maybe go down this like rebuild path where you take the long way, but you build it up sustainably. You're like, however you got there, you got there. So I give them credit for sure on that. Now, as much as you're going to give them credit, you're also like, you have to be able to hold them accountable for when things don't go well. And, I think when things happen in the room that are out of your control, that's tough because you can only do so much. You can't be the mediator with, between two players that are of that high profile in your group, but there are things that are in your control. Making sure that players have a plan and follow that plan in the offseason, making sure your goaltender is feeling 100% before, he kind of has to ramp things up. Like there's things that the organization can have their fingers on the pulse for, and there's other things you can't. So forgetting about the things that you can't, I think the things that they could have done, there are some things along the way that you say, well, you could have done that differently. Like, maybe Pettersson is different if whatever he needed to be addressed got addressed. Maybe the Demko situation needed to be handled differently. Like, we don't know. Like, we're not behind the scenes on all these things. But just like you give them flowers when things go well, that's your leadership group. Those are your adults in the room, and the adults, need to be, we need to point it out when things don't necessarily go well, and there are things that are in their control as well.
Putting the screws to a rookie on an ELC, for instance.
Sure, there's another one.
Do you need to do that right now, right?
Do you need to disparage Brock Besser after the trade deadline when it just you didn't get the offers, like those type of optic things. Like I said, like winning cures everything, and we don't talk about it. We stopped talking about Bo Horvat and that whole situation because the team won, and it was okay, everything's all good now. But when you lose and things get ugly, then all of a sudden these old conversations or the relevant conversations creep up back again.
How do you think Rutherford did yesterday in terms of trying to damage control?
Listen, I think, okay, so I'm not in the market, but I follow the market. My sense watching from the outside is that he was just pretty genuine and authentic in what he usually is. And like I don't think he did any more damage than could have been done. I just think he was basically, this is what it is, and laid it all out there. And I don't think it was overly inflammatory, but he kind of like let us in on what was happening at least. So I appreciate that. It felt different than the end of the year press conference. Like that felt like it had a different tone. That was a bit of a wild ride. So I don't have any, it's not like I have some big grand takeaway from the Jim Rutherford media availability yesterday. There is one thing though, like I would love to chime in on if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah, please chime.
The practice facility thing. Like this has been something that's been going on there for a long time, right? And all these teams now have practice facilities that are designed to help your organization in every way, shape, or form, whether it's like multiple ice pads, a big sprawling facility where you can do so much more off the ice and you can add different types of, treatment modalities and you have room for all these things. And when you're a coach and you're like, I look around the league and I see every team has that investment and is making that investment, and I don't have that tool at my disposal. So I'm playing a different game than the other guys, and I think I could make our team better with, and I'll give you an example. Like, you may think an ice surface is just an ice surface. Like, what's the big deal? Well, teams now will do, like, a practice that starts on one pad, with, like, power play, special teams, whatever, and then they go right to the other pad, and it's flooded, and it's easy, and you're now limiting your practice time at like 40 minutes instead of saying, well, I would love to get an ice scrape in, so we got to go back into the room and, so we can do special teams on some fresh ice. Like that's utilizing both ice pads. There's other things where, teams will do devoted skill sessions for 20 minutes, let's say. It's like the D are going to go on one pad with the D guy. The forwards are going to go on one pad with the forward guy. You're going to go out there for 20 minutes, and then we're all going to go on the other, like the third pad, and we're going to have practice. And there's no ice scrape, and we're on the ice for 40 minutes, and we're in and out. And it's like, that's how you maximize your players' time at the rink, and you're not having them sit around for longer periods of time. Like, these are small little examples, but over the course of a season, like, those things will add up, and you spend money on, athletic therapy and sports science, and your coaches, have these ideas that they want to implement, but if they're handcuffed by it, like, that's why the practice facility thing means a lot for coaches. There's just, it's a tool that they don't have.
The other thing is
100%.
The other thing is an office. A nest, because they're only in their office at Rogers Arena when they're practicing there. But when Pink's got a concert there, guess what? They're just they're a guest at UBC. They're a guest wherever.
And Frank, I don't dispute a single syllable of what you just said. Let me play devil's advocate for a small second with a follow-up. You're a free agent. Your agent comes to you and says, Frank, the Vancouver Canucks are offering slightly more money, and your role with the Vancouver Canucks looks slightly bigger than it does with Team X, but they don't have a practice facility. Does that make the decision for you? Like, is that a deal breaker for you?
But if it's even money.
No, the practice facility thing is not going to factor in if you're a free agent. For me, anyways, I don't think it will. It's more on like a team level, coaching, maximizing,
for sure,
maximizing rest, maximizing your days at the rink, that type of stuff. A player probably looks at it and says, "Oh, I don't have to drive 30 minutes to the practice rink a little bit outside of town. Yeah, okay. Like I'll just go to the game rink. It's not it's not a recruitment thing per se. Although I will say, like, the teams that I played on outside of Vancouver, like I played in Toronto, their practice facility was incredible, like so good. And then in Pittsburgh, it was like Toronto's practice facility, but 10 years newer. So like that, it felt like it was Toronto's facility on roids almost. And I'm like,
but word gets out amongst the players too,
God.
Frank, that this place is a great place to play. Like they treat you well, like that.
That's it. It's
the
about
holistic "they treat you well" thing. Whether they drill down, it's because of the practice. The holistic "they treat you well" here. That does get brought up.
It also indicates the seriousness of winning, right?
Yeah.
Like that's the other thing.
Yeah, but that's the reality that the Canucks are faced with right now. They don't have a practice rink, and they got to make the most of what they got. And for whoever the new coach is going to be, like he's not going to be able to do the multi-pad practice that a lot of other coaches are doing with the skill development or the injured ice or the special teams ice. It's not a reality. So you gotta find a way to move past it. But it would be a nice tool to have if you were the coach of the team.
Teams like the LA Kings, who have the same land issue that we have here. What do they have, 4 there at the Toyota complex there in El Segundo? It's unbelievable, and they can do exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Talk had made the correct decision, I think, for him. What do you think? You think he gets one of these East Coast openings or openings down south?
Or TV, which is more likely.
Yeah, I think he's probably going to take one of these East Coast things. I don't know, right away when the Philly job opened up, I was like, well, doesn't that make sense for Rick Tocchet? And I'll tell you why I think that is a job opening that would be highly sought after if you're a coach. Because you can add a lot of legs to your tenure there based on when the team is going to be expected to win. Meaning, Rick Tocchet goes there right away. He's not being judged on wins and losses yet. He's being judged on, can you build a culture here that eventually, when we get the pieces for you, we can win. And then once the pieces are all in place, then it takes a little while to get them, into like a playoff realm. Then you're judged by wins and losses. So ask yourself this. How many years is that for the Philadelphia Flyers? Is that like 5 years away? So, I mean, you can have that conversation, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5 years away. My point is, it's a good spot to be if you're a coach, because all you need to do is build a foundation, build a culture, do things the right way by your young players that you're going to need to lean on at some point. And then a few years down the road, then you'll be judged on wins and losses. And so now you're not a coach that goes somewhere and is expected to win right away and has a short shelf life and you're like in and out in 2 years. You're a coach that says, we're building a program here and there's going to need to be a little bit of patience, but we're going to turn the corner and then we will win. That turns from like a 2-year tenure into like a 7-year tenure, and you have really good job security.
If he goes to the New York Rangers.
And you're beloved there too. Right? People want you to succeed. Yeah. They are going to give you the benefit of the doubt.
If he goes to the New York, though, right? Like that. That's
of course it can. It did this year in Vancouver. Like
no,
last
but like
year,
the legendary players. Like sometimes you have this like image of the legendary player that played there, and you're like, man, I would hate to hate that guy because I loved him as a player, right? But with that being said, like Joe Sakic has avoided that in Colorado. I'm like Stevie Y's an interesting one right now because
he's starting to feel it there, especially after that presser yesterday, Frank.
Trevor Linden got out soon enough here where I don't think he tarnished his reputation at all.
Like Rob Blake's in LA, and I think it depends on which corner of LA King fandom you talk to, what their opinion would be there. But the team's in the playoffs every year. Can't get past the Oilers. But yeah, I think, as much as he's a legend there, I don't think they turn on him quickly. Because you're not getting judged by the wins and losses yet.
No. Let me ask you this. If he goes to the Rangers, does that damn the decisions of the Vancouver Canucks management to trade JT Miller? Because if he chooses the team where JT Miller is the second best forward on the team and has a no move and is not going anywhere and is signed for eternity, if he's saying, I want to be with that guy,
Yeah.
Does that say, well, why did the management trade him?
Doesn't that, wouldn't that be interesting? Like,
Yeah.
okay, the management traded him. You were very aware of everything that happened in the room. You know the dynamic, you know the arguments, like, you know it from all different angles. And you would probably have, Rick Tocchet's going to have multiple opportunities to coach. Like, I don't think it's just one team picking up the phone and calling him and saying, hey, let's talk business. But if he picks up the Rangers at the top of the pile and says, I can win with this group and I can win with JT Miller, it does let you know where he stood on the whole thing.
Right.
That would be very telling for sure, given the fact that there's going to be multiple options on the table for him.
Honestly, I don't think there's a lot of murkiness in terms of where he stood on the whole thing.
For sure.
I mean, I think at one point JT's attitude, his language, his deportment got to the point where Rick had to step up for Elias Pettersson and others whom JT was clashing with. But I think it is crystal clear that he feels like he hasn't been able to get through to Elias, and that Elias hasn't applied the lessons.
And that he's willing to work with JT.
And that he absolutely loved JT Miller prior to the benching in Nashville, because I think he felt like he was the perfect antidote to, get him back on track when JT was burning a little too hot. I think he loved the dynamic there until it all went south in that against Nashville in the benching. I want to ask you one more question, but you wanted to add onto that?
It honestly might be a moot point though with the Rangers thing, because it feels like it just screams
Sullivan.
Mike Sullivan to me.
Yeah.
It really does.
So.
Guy that has not coached a team that's been on the precipice of making the playoffs. You need a quick turnaround. Like Sully is he's the spark that team would need.
Yeah, the only thing I would say there is that he's a Boston guy. He was a young coach there who probably wasn't ready. He may want to right a wrong by going home. And, Boston's in a team cycle, much like the point you were just making about Philadelphia, where your security might be longer there than it is in New York, where you have a little bit of an erratic owner, and you're going to be expected to turn it around quickly with a lot of guys in their 30s whose best hockey might be.
They've got 3 years left.
Yes,
them.
They've got
The
3 years
only
left tops.
The only fear I'd have if I were going to Boston is, are we the next version of Pittsburgh that I just left?
Right.
Yeah,
where there's
possible.
not much in the cupboard, and it might not be that quick of a turnaround. And you think Sweeney and Cam Neely are going to be patient with you the way Jonesy and Briere would be? I don't think so. Look what they did to Jim Montgomery this year. And
I hear you there, Frank. I might like my chances of sticking around longer than Sweeney or Neely if you take that
that's
job.
A fair point. That's a fair point for sure.
And then you look at the Rangers: Panarin, Zibanejad, Miller, Kreider, Trocheck, all on the wrong side of 30. So you've got to get them playing good hockey, and then you've got to find replacements for them soon enough. Of course, I mean, you do have the great goaltender there. Last question for you. Peter Laviolette and Manny Malhotra are candidates here in Vancouver, as per Jim Rutherford yesterday. A thought or two on those two gentlemen?
So the Laviolette thing is interesting because there's no doubt, great coaching resume, great career, but short tenure. Everywhere he's gone the last little while, right? It's 1 year or 2 years, and might get you a quick little burst in 1 year, but it feels like it's not far or not long after that. He kind of gets shown the door. So that's always something you have to look at and say, buyer beware. And Jim Rutherford also brought up the point, Vancouver hasn't been able to retain coaches for a long period of time. It just, it hasn't happened. He brought up Pat Quinn. He brought up AV. It would be nice if the fan base, the media base, the team, the players, if they could have someone that could be there, make an investment in a coach that could stick around for a while. And Manny is an interesting name because you guys know Manny from when he played. He was a pseudo coach when he was playing, right? Yeah. Very sharp eye for the game, big leadership qualities. He's obviously done a really nice job in Abbotsford, especially with the young players there. And I always love the story of the young coach that gets the opportunity and makes the most of it instead of let's just go back to the well on someone who got recycled through. And I have no doubt Manny, if you knew him as a player, he put in the work. Coaching is obviously different. You're grinding and cutting video for hours and hours. He'd be putting in the work, and he's an astute guy. So, listen, you don't know, you don't know what it's going to be like for those guys until they get to the NHL and they have to do it and they have to implement things and they have to manage personalities. Like managing AHL personalities is not the same as managing NHL personalities.
Fair,
right?
fair.
And that's where experience kind of comes in. But I would say, I mean, if those are your two options, which I'm sure there's going to be way more, but if those are your two options, I'm more intrigued by Manny and what that can be in the long term than just getting like a short burst and then looking for a coach again in 2 years.
Yeah. Did you have much dealings with Alex Burrows calling Canadians games? I know he's in player development, not on the bench these days, but did you have much dealings with Burr?
Used to. Well, I would see him around a little bit when he was on the bench, just crossing paths. But yeah, he's more on the player development side now. But yeah, for sure.
This is pet project. He wants Burrows.
No, it's not my pet project.
No?
It's just, you cover this team for 17, 18 years. You get to know if Francesco loves Alex.
to get the band back together.
Francesco loves marquee value. Alex Burrows is still a very big name and beloved figure in this community. It would put a lot of deodorant on what is a smelly situation right now. He has coached, and if Francesco has influence, would he be pushing guys that he wants on Rutherford and Alvin, and would Burrows be one of them? I mean, when he was on the Montreal Canadiens bench a couple of years ago, Blake, we were all sitting there talking about it's a fait accompli. There will come a day where Alex Burrows coaches with the Vancouver Canucks. It may not be as the head coach, but there would be a strong desire to repatriate him. I mean, they quickly put him in the Ring of Honor, I'll remind you, over players who I think you could argue were better players or had better Canucks careers than Alex Burrows, and yet he was so beloved that he instantly, or pretty quickly after his retirement, got elevated in the annals of the club. So it's a name that I'm watching, Frank. No more,
I don't think that one is, would they balk at bringing him in? I think that one is do I want to move back across the country and do I want to go back behind the bench and all the hours that entails, right? Like, if you kind of fill in the blanks there, you go from behind the bench to in player development, maybe you want to spend a little more time at home with the family and to go back into it and then just move away from everyone. That's where that maybe gets snagged. But I mean, I have no doubt if Burrows was behind the bench, he would be great. Like he's a smart hockey guy and he's really good at relating to the players. It's just, how do you make it work?
Yeah. And if Alex, if it's a family situation that is preventing Alex from coaching right now, then I completely understand that. Of course, if Alex wants to be a head coach, he is going to have to move out of the province of Quebec.
I think that's it. If he wants to do it, I think he'll do it. I don't think if he called them and said, I'm interested in this, they're not hanging up.
No, hell no. He's getting an interview. Yep. Thank you very much, Frank. Appreciate this. Until next week, bud.
All right, boys. Have a good one.
Cigars and Price from the Historic Wall Center, where you extend your game night with a staycation here at the Wall. Downtown Vancouver. Book a Cigars and Price exclusive rate, 604-331-1000. Tell them we sent you some blackout date supply based on availability. This next block brought to you by the Whistler Golf Club, the Arnold Palmer Design Whistler Golf Club. We'll get to our golf report tomorrow. Getting close. Spring preparations down to the nitty-gritty. Opening day a little more than a week away on May 9th. And now accepting online bookings for the entirety of the 2025 season. No need to wait. Get those times locked up. And if you do have a group of 12 or more, you got to get on this quickly. The prime times fill up fast there. Get your tee times on hold. And tell them about your group. whistlergolf.com/groups. Well, Vancouver Whitecaps FC, look, Blake, I know they've played playoff matches. I know they've even played second-round playoff matches. We were there that fateful evening in Seattle a few years ago. But is it fair to say this is the biggest match in MLS club history?
Yeah, and as great as hoisting a Canadian Championship trophy has been, it's nice to beat the couple other foes. You know you're not necessarily beating a big field.
No.
You're not beating the cream of the crop in most years.
No. I mean, when TFC was really going there,
Yeah.
it may have been a better achievement, but this is continental, right? Like, you're beating the best club teams from 3 countries.
And countries with, or clubs with, like, huge budgets, you know, like that have brought in decorated European players.
Like, they have players with huge budgets.
Yes. Yeah.
Inter Miami tonight.
So you're a win away from getting into the final of a real cup. Like, this is a legit cup.
And we expect Lionel Messi will go the whole 90 and more after sitting out Miami's game on the weekend. Of course, Vancouver leads 2-0 on the aggregate. This is the second leg, a 5:30 start, CONCACAF Champions Cup. A victory gets them into the final against either Cruz Azul or Tigres from Mexico. And as we know, the Whitecaps unbeaten in 8, just rolling teams in MLS play. Brian White named the MLS Player of the Month for April. Pedro Vite made the MLS Team of the Week after coming on and being such a factor against Minnesota.
But the good news is neither one of them expended a whole lot of energy that night. Brian White expended 0 kilojoules and Pedro Vite very few. So, you know, obviously the absence of Ryan Gauld is felt. But for the
hasn't
most
quite yet been.
No, just I mean, in terms of the buildup, you'd love to have him at your disposal. But they've played so well without him, and everybody else has been well taken care of in terms of management. They're putting forth a pretty good effort here, pretty good group of 11 to 14 versus Miami.
There is a narrow pathway where Vancouver could host the CONCACAF Champions final at BC Place, and it is just a single game. We dispense with the tie system for the final. They want that, sort of one game Super Bowl type feel to it. It does require several things to happen here. I was a little unclear earlier in the week. But the bottom line is they're playing with some margin tonight, right? Like, they can give up 2 goals, draw 2-2, and go through.
They can lose by 2 goals. And the minute they score a goal, again.
Yes, the minute they score a goal.
You're asking Miami to score 4. Mm-hmm. They just need to score 1 goal, and then Miami needs to score at least 4.
Because they would advance on away goals if that was the case, if they tie on the aggregate. A 3-1 loss, good enough to go through here. It just incredible. Like, against Lionel Messi, Suarez, and Miami. Like, we're talking about this. So it is real. It is factual.
And here's the only reason.
If you're a soccer supporter in this community.
Here's the only reason, like, they need the other game, Cruz Azul game, Tigres game, to be a draw, to have a chance to move forward and host the event.
They also have to win too, don't they?
Yeah, by at least 2 goals.
Right.
Here's the path where that can happen. They score an early one. Because what happens there is then Miami knows we've got to score 4 tonight, and Miami takes all sorts of crazy chances, and they already did take a bunch of crazy chances at BC Place. They get so forward, so offensive-minded, knowing they need to score 4, that the Whitecaps score a bunch on the counter. Like that's a reasonable thing that could happen here, but they need to get that first early goal.
BC Lions conduct their Canadian College draft yesterday, and Ryan Rigmaiden all smiles, the new Lions general manager, after selecting 7 players from the 2025 class. Now, we told you BC penalized draft picks for going over the cap, and of course, I've also made some trades. So they didn't pick until the 11th overall in the second round. They took defensive end Hayden Harris from the University of Montana. Rigmaiden called him the number 1 player on their board, a 6'5", 255-pound pass rusher, fits with the defensive scheme and with the BC Lions ratio deployment, where you're going to have Mathieu Betts. And, of course, They've got Christian Covington on the inside, so already Canadian defensive linemen expected to play and play prominent roles for the Lions. Harris comes in and joins that group as a rotational player. And then the second pick is the guy we talked about yesterday, North Vancouver's Jackson Findlay, a safety from the University of Western Ontario, taken 16th overall, and a fourth-generation CFL player. His great-grandfather played for Hamilton. His grandfather won a Grey Cup with the Lions in 1964. His father played in the CFL. A cerebral player, a physical player, a terrific athlete coming out of the youth sport level, former Vancouver College fighting Irish, and Rigmaiden delighted to get him there where they got him. In fact, had to make a trade with Toronto to get him, move up 3 spots and secure him. And from there, it was pretty much physical offensive lineman. And Rigmaiden has been consistent in his messaging in terms of what kind of team does he want to build? What does he want to build in his image? Where do they need to improve? Physicality on both sides of the ball. Canadian offensive line, sadly, has been a weak position for the BC Lions for a number of years. They added Connor Klassen. He's an offensive tackle from Regina, may have to move in to guard. Dre Doiron, he's played some big-time football, Kansas University. That's Power 5 NCAA conference. He has played center, and then also another center from the University of Western. So physical offensive linemen and athletic defenders were the themes of the day for the BC Lions at the Canadian College Draft.
And Curtis Rourke, a Saskatchewan Rough
Curtis
Rider.
Rourke, a Saskatchewan Rough Rider. And shout out to the other North Van kid we talked about yesterday, Keelan White, receiver from Montana, wound up going with the 3rd overall selection to the Ottawa.
And where's Shooter Sanders playing again?
Cleveland.
No. In the Canadian Football
Toronto
League.
has his
Toronto,
rights.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Raheem Ismail 2.0.
Ricky Williams 2.0.
Did
Doug Flutie 2.0. Andre Ware 2.0.
Well, the only guy that came in sort of at the top of his game-ish was Rocket. The others were finding.
Well, that's because, as you may recall, Rocket got a lot of money from Bruce McNall.
Yeah.
And Wayne Gretzky and John Candy.
A little tougher in the CFL cap era.
Yes, yes. We were at the Nat last night for the Vancouver Canadians as they kicked off a homestand against Hillsborough. It was not the cleanest baseball game. 15-9, the Seas win to even their mark on the season at 11-11. 26 walks and 4 errors.
Was it 26?
It was 26. There was a whole lot of throwing the ball around. There was a whole lot of missing the strike zone. There was a whole lot of
They loaded the bases twice in the first inning. In the first inning, they loaded the bases twice.
Good night, needless to say, for the Canadians hitters when you score 15 runs. Game was 3 hours and 47 minutes. I'm sure it will be shorter tonight as the Seas go for 4 in a row. And now only 2 games back of first place. As we always tell you, Vancouver Canadians tickets, get on them quickly, 604-872-5232 or CanadiansBaseball.com.
And it was a very nice evening. Like,
was
there
a
was a
very
little bit of a
pleasant
chill,
evening.
obviously, given the month we're in, but it was, and it's warmer tonight and even warmer still tomorrow night.
And here's the other thing I can advise. There's more netting around the ballpark. This has been the case at every ballpark, major and minor league, over the last couple of years. Still, it behooves you to keep your head up, looking for foul balls when you're in the stance. And then when you're leaving the Nat, keep your head down. I'm walking out to the Uber pickup spot last night, and I see like an object on the ground, and I'm like, what is it? That looks like a baseball. Sure enough, an official Rawlings minor league issue baseball. I caught a stray in the parking lot last night on my way to the Uber.
Yeah, that wouldn't have happened in July.
Brought it home, had the scuff mark. You could tell it hit a bat and that it flew out of the net. Hell of a foul ball based on where it landed.
Congratulations.
So I got a souvenir
There you go.
from last night's game. Poll question results. Surrey Mitsubishi poll question results. from Tuesday. Asked you, do you think Quinn Hughes has any chance of repeating as Norris winner? Yes or no? The people said
No.
indeed. Percentage
68.
70. Ron, no. And to be fair, Makar deserves it this year. Chris, if the voters took the time to read the fancy stats and actually watch him control games, he would win easily. Well, I don't know. That's a little...
It's certainly tighter. He is right on that. It is certainly a tighter race if you look at all the stats available.
Jan, he will win it again, just not this season. His injuries hurt his chances as well as Makar played incredible down the stretch. Honestly, Hughes should be in consideration for the Hart. It's funny, I made that point with some of our guests this year that based on the wording of the Hart Trophy, a judge most valuable to his team, I think you could almost say Quinn had a better case for the Hart than he did as most outstanding defenseman.
Well,
this season.
To take the team within a couple of wins of the playoffs at the very least, how many, and I haven't done the homework, maybe somebody else has, on biggest differences between first place scoring and second place scoring on your team. You know, what was it, 26 points or whatever it is for Quinn Hughes? I mean, that's got to be amongst the biggest, if not, you know, the
only Carlson has had a bigger gap between him and the next highest scorer on his team as defenseman goes.
As a defenseman, yeah.
Yeah. Errors and omissions from yesterday's program and beyond. Forgive Cam Robinson. He's down in Dallas covering the U18s. He called Jonathan Lekramaki a healthy scratch in Game 3. We've become aware there's a dental issue there. That's why he was wearing the full shield. So I'm not sure it was an entirely healthy scratch. That one could go either way for Manny Malhotra. Also, Yerke, I simply misspoke. I was talking about that Erik Karlsson season, actually, talking about en route to the, should have said Norris Award. I said the Vezina. You know, most people would hear that and say, oh, Matt just misspoke. He meant Norris instead of Vezina. No, Yerke had to write that one in.
It's a fine tooth comb that he's using here. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us, everybody.
He might get you again on calling it the Norris Award. You just called it the Norris Award.
Trophy.
Yeah. You're going to be in trouble again.
Can you imagine being Yerke's kid? Dad, I'm done my homework. Oh, you think you're done your homework?
Hand it over.
Let me see your work. We love Yerke. Out of market listener. Serving the public here in Canada. Attaboy. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you spending some time and connecting with the program. Please do subscribe to all our assorted channels, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Follow on social, X, Insta, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and Blue Sky. Live on many of those platforms, noon Pacific time. And, of course, support the community sponsors you hear us talking about. Keep it local.